Okay, we're live.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to a working meeting of the council. Why don't we get going? I guess we're going to have a presentation to the council from, I believe it's Equinor, right, John? So I don't know if you want to facilitate this.
Sure, I'll just do a quick queue up and then hand it over to the Equinor team. For folks that have been following it, the federal government and the state have leased out land off the south shore of Long Beach and Jones Beach for the development of an offshore wind energy facility. And recently that leasing, or the rights to that leasing and to the production of that energy facility, was awarded to Equinor Wind. Or just Equinor, I guess, to run the facility. So Equinor is going to be the developer of the project. This is, a federal and a state project. Long Beach doesn't have any control over it, but long story short, windmills need to be connected to the power grid somehow. And Equinor is going to be looking to make landfall somewhere on the Barrier Island. So this impacts our residents. And we wanted to be able to give the council a little bit of preview about what this project is all about. We're a number of years out from this being reality, but we wanted to get the council and the public aware that this was coming down the pike. So I think tonight, speaking on the project, well, we have a number of people on the screen from Equinor, but Julia Bovi, Alamato, and Daniel Busi from Equinor are going to be speaking to the project. I believe it's going to be Julia Bovi, who's going to be running through their presentation tonight to talk a little bit about what this project is, who Equinor is, and what the opportunity is for not just Long Beach, but Long Island and New York State, as we try and transition to a clean energy or carbon-free energy system. So with that, I would hand it over to Julia.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you so much, councilwomen and women, for having us tonight. This is a large, complex project that we're going to present, but really at the end of the day, your neck of the woods is no stranger to energy development. You've had a power plant there since the 40s, and lots changed since then. And what we hope at the end of the day, and we're still a few years out, is that you'll continue to be a place where reliable, affordable energy is distributed to the communities around you. And at the end of the day, that's what we're working toward. So I'm going to share my screen. That's okay. And we have a presentation. And John, what do you want me to take questions as we go, or wait to the end?
Yeah, I mean, this is an informal working session of the council. So they're essentially at liberty to, and then the public are obviously watching, and are able to view this after the fact because it's recorded and put on YouTube. But this is an informational session for the council so that they can be informed about the project, and whatever decisions might come across their desk moving forward. So I think you defer to, if somebody jumps in with a question, go ahead and field it.
Absolutely. That's absolutely fine. And so here we go. Let's see. Now, of course, first thing, I won't be able to advance the slides. There we go. So first of all, who's Equinor? You may be asking yourselves, we're not exactly a household word. We are an energy company that was founded in Norway back in the 70s, when the Norwegian people thought they might have oil and gas off their shores, but the seas were too rough and the conditions too dangerous for any private company to go figure it out. So the Norwegians, in sort of their Viking spirit, got together, started a company, and found oil. And their nation became quite successful doing that. But they were also ahead of the rest of the world in figuring out that climate change is real, and that if we didn't change the way we make energy and use energy really quickly, we were going to miss our chance to stave off the worst effects of climate change. So about 10, 15 years ago, the company realized that hey, we're really good at building big things out in the ocean. Let's do offshore wind. The first offshore wind farms in Europe were around 1991. So this has been happening in Europe for quite a while, but not so much here in the US. I just want to share a little bit more about Equinor, particularly our values. You know, we are now, and we were started as a Norwegian company. We're now a publicly traded company since the 90s. Our majority shareholder is still the Norwegian people, and they're frankly a pretty good shareholder to have because they care a lot about values and about the future and the planet. So our values are open, courageous, collaborative, and caring. And for my line of work, you couldn't ask for a better set of values, right? Because we're trying to build something big. We have a huge bar to climb over when it comes to proving that this is something that people of Long Island, particularly the South Shore, should welcome into their communities. So we're here to start to build this conversation with you. A little bit about the portfolio, offshore wind portfolio that Equinor's built so far. Most of our offshore wind development is in the North Sea, in the United Kingdom, Scotland, and off of England as well. We're currently building the world's largest offshore wind project called Dogger Bank in the UK. But in 2016, Equinor realized that it was really time to go big in the US market. At that point, about, I think, 5-6 offshore wind lease areas had already been leased out by the US federal government. There was an auction in the last days of 2016. Empire Wind is what we call it today. That's the lease area that Equinor bought then. Since then, we have bought a second lease area to power the northeastern US as well. So there are a lot of good offshore wind markets in the world, but I would argue that New York is the best because no place else can you make clean electricity on such a large scale, so close to where people live, so close to a big electric load. It really is a nice fit. So here are our projects currently that we're building for New York. So we buy the offshore wind lease areas from the federal government, and then we have to sell the energy we plan to build. And in the case of these 3 projects, Empire Wind 1, Empire Wind 2, and Beacon Wind 1, we placed bids in New York, competitive bids in a competitive procurement, and we won. So now we have 3,300 megawatts of renewable power that we are on deck to build for New York. It's like 10 Caithness power plants, which is the newest power plant on Long Island. It's a lot of power. By building this in the way that we've laid out, the total direct jobs for these projects is 5,200, and we're going to add over $5 billion to the New York State economy by building these 3 projects. And of course, there are other offshore wind projects happening in New York as well, but this is what we're responsible for. Empire Wind 2 is the project I most want to talk to you about tonight. This project we found out we won in January. It's 1,200 megawatts, and it's the outer, or you could say the southeast area of this pizza slice shaped area in the ocean. We have looked at possible places to interconnect the power from this area. We've looked at the whole South Shore and even New Jersey, and it probably won't surprise you to know that there is space on the grid and really good interconnection capacity at the Barrett power plant. And that's even if that power plant continues to run as it's been running. That place is wired to power this part of the South Shore, and it would be a great place for us to be able to bring our cable. This project will be built here in New York. Part of winning the award for this project makes us responsible for rebuilding a massive port in Brooklyn. And we'll also do the long-term operations and maintenance for the offshore wind farms from New York as well. One of the things that makes our projects popular is we intend to use a type of foundation. That's what anchors the windmill on the seabed, called a gravity-based structure. We decided to use this type of foundation for a couple of reasons, but really we looked at the whole New York supply chain. and asked, what is New York excellent at making? And the answer is massive structures out of concrete and rebar. And a lot of folks said it would be at least a decade after the first offshore wind farm went in the waters before we saw any local content. But New York really made it very, very clear that if you wanted to win an offshore wind project in New York, you're gonna figure out how to make things here. And so that's what we've done. And these are also a good type of foundation because they don't require pile driving. And that's very important because, as you know, there are whales off the South Shore, and we want to be as low impact as possible for them. I mentioned the port that we will rebuild. This is a port that's been empty for about 30 years. It was a major port in the Second World War, and it's been empty because the community there has been hoping that another industrial developer would come in and create blue-collar jobs there. And that's what we plan to do by building the project there. In addition to those construction jobs and assembly jobs, we also plan to have our long-term operations there. And for that, we'll focus on training and hiring workers from the places where we interconnect the cable to be able to have those long-term operations and maintenance jobs. Those workers work at sea 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. On a vessel like this red one here, it's like a big hotel. So it would be, for the right person who's interested in that, a fine position for somebody from Long Beach, because 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off is not a terrible commute. It's 30 miles. We are also committed to building the nation's first offshore wind tower factory up at the Port of Albany. We partnered with 2 companies that make towers. One makes onshore towers in Canada, one makes offshore towers in Denmark. And so together we will make these towers in Albany. And not only will we use these towers built here in New York for Empire 1, Empire 2, and Beacon Wind, but we really think they'll be a terrific option even for our competition, to get more of that supply chain in New York. This is the O&M base, which I mentioned. That means operations and maintenance. This is where the permanent staff will muster and go out to the lease area for their shifts. It has a small warehouse, and it also has the computer systems where we control the wind farm. Workforce development is a big topic in offshore wind, something Governor Cuomo's been very focused on, and so has Nassau County for sure. So we've been working for several years now with some leaders at educational institutions like Farmingdale and the whole SUNY system, and as well as labor unions on Long Island and in New York City, to figure out what, if any, gaps are there in the workforce. How can we invest early in workforce readiness and training? We are working in close collaboration with labor unions. They're going to do the work, building these ports, assembling these projects, and building these transmission cables, which are major infrastructure projects unto themselves. We've been forming partnerships on, yeah, please.
This is Liz. I just have a quick question regarding the workforce.
Yeah.
Is there any information that we could provide the school district, if they don't know, but they probably already do, I don't know, on the different areas that students should be studying for future events like this?
That's a great question. We have a presentation that we do pre-COVID that we would do in schools, but providing information for the school system is a great idea that we haven't thought of. I mean, a significant amount of these jobs are ones where we, the company, train the people and send them and get them certified. But at the same time, knowing a bit about science and engineering, can never hurt in getting into these jobs as well. So that's a great point. and it's certainly something we can look into. What's the most valuable information we could provide?
And I would just add real quickly, both counties are very actively involved in this. It's not just Equinor that's looking to develop offshore wind. It's a number of other companies and a number of other leased areas as well. So there's a nonprofit group called the Workforce Development Institute that's really been spearheading this. And they've been interfacing with both counties, and the counties are in turn working with BOCES and individual school districts to really highlight, which individual businesses can sort of transition to this kind of work, and what are, to your point, Liz, what are the skill sets and what are the career opportunities, that the middle school and high school kids can begin to start honing in order to be ready to, enter the workforce fully skilled up. So it's an initiative that's happening on a regional level, but I'm not sure that it's really quite distilled down into the local level in Long Beach schools yet, but that's something that we can look at and try and make those connections.
Absolutely. So part of that work is happening in these partnerships. A lot of institutions on Long Island have have come forward and really helped us and the rest of the industry think about how this can be successful. There aren't many times in one's life that you see a new industry form, and we want to try to get it right from the start. So making sure that the New York State Offshore Wind Training Institute is investing on Long Island, is investing in the communities where we hope to interconnect power is a big part of this. Again, working with labor, but also with conservation groups. There are some terrific environmental groups in your area who we've met with and we continue to talk to about the ways that we can do this the most responsibly. And we've also worked quite a bit with fishermen, commercial fishermen out east, but sport fishermen and charter captains to make sure that they understand that these will be places they can continue to fish. We have really good reports on fishing in offshore wind farms from Rhode Island and from the UK. So the area will remain open for mariners. So before I leave this slide, I know I have taxes and pilot assess on this slide, and I do want to make the point that this is just the beginning of a conversation, but clearly your community is really well positioned to be able to host a cable if that is something that you choose to explore with us. When we start a conversation like this, we want to make sure that we're always open, answer questions, provide any information that's needed, and this is work that we would be considering doing in 2024, 2025, 2026. And so we have time, is what I want to make clear. When I show you the next slide, I don't want you to think that anything's been decided. We have time to have this conversation. So this slide shows the areas where we would like to be able to bring the cable in order to get from the lease area out at sea to that green area, which is where the substation is that's associated with the Barrett Power Plant. So when I say landfall, what I mean is we bring the cable onto land by horizontally drilling 50 feet under beach. So there's no digging on the beach. That part is done underground. And then the cable, once it's onshore and it's pulled up, is buried very similarly to how a new fiber optic or small gas line would be buried. So it's infrastructure that ideally, once it's buried underground, you don't see it again. And it would connect the power from the wind farm to Barrett. I like to say sometimes that if we were only proposing this and no offshore wind farm, this would still be probably one of the biggest infrastructure undertakings happening in New York. But it's a crucial part of the new energy system. So I'm really happy to answer questions and sort of, get you thinking about this and just love to hear your reaction.
John, is it all right if I ask a question?
Sure.
So, being somewhat familiar with the project from a law enforcement perspective, I've already had some meetings about this with the United States Coast Guard, and trying to do some future planning about it from a Homeland Security point of view. What provisions in the product in the project are you making? Because this is going to be, you're going to have termination points here in Long Beach, I would imagine. Is anything going to be above ground, or simply just going to be below the city streets here? And from the water side, especially Homeland Security wise, what sort of preparations or have you done, or planning have you done in that regard?
Well, thanks for mentioning the meetings with Coast Guard. We've meeting with them a lot about many aspects of the project, but in Nassau County, they've really been terrific in terms of thinking about this and how we'll work with them in the future on things like emergency response. In the UK, we're almost always the first mariners to respond to emergencies in that part of the sea, and that is something we, hope will always be available for in this part of the sea as well. So a lot of our security concerns are for cybersecurity and how the project is run and managed. I mean, we've all seen this thing that's happening with the pipeline and the cyber attack there. So we have the utmost security when it comes to how we run the wind farm. But to answer your question, there isn't anything currently planned above ground on the land, except for we have to build our own substation that's next to, or is very nearby the existing substation, to change the voltage of the power. But
That's going to be on the barrier island of Long Beach?
No, that would be up near in Oceanside, if we're able to do that. Yeah. No, that would not be. And you have major infrastructure coming in and out of there now, as you know, gas, fiber optic, but it's all
by the Barrett plant. Yeah. So what I'm curious about though is, like, they're looking to us, and the conversations we're looking to us is how we could support them, meaning the Coast Guard. And we don't really have a full-time marine capability here. We have a part-time marine capability here on an as-needed emergency basis. So I'm just curious as to those concerns. But if the actual physical infrastructure isn't something that you're concerned about here, and I don't know how deep it's going to be, and I'm sure we'll get some of this information from you so we know, but physical infrastructure is going to need to be protected, and we want, if this makes us a target, we need to understand that.
That's a very, very good point. Thus far, this has not been identified in any way as something that would be a target, but it's something that we continue to think about. And one I thought really productive conversation with your local Coast Guard station was, would they need any additional equipment, for any kind of response that they don't now. So we're talking that through with them, thinking it through, bringing some expertise from other parts of the world where we've built wind farms to think about whether it's, caused needs for additional resources. But it's a great point, and let me keep thinking about that for that law enforcement aspect, especially for once it's built. I mean, during construction is one thing, and then after it's built, I'll take that to my team and we'll talk more about it.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Julia. This is Joe Fabrizio from Long Beach. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Great topic presentation. Very interesting. I had a couple of questions. You mentioned that this, once it goes on shore, I guess it's essentially a typical trench excavation. This is 1,200 megawatts. Obviously, that's extremely, deadly amount of electricity for anybody who would potentially excavate and hit it. What type of how deep is it? What type of is it a conduit? How deep? How wide is the cable? How big is the cable? Is it protected in any way, shape, or form when it's in the ground? And then generally, I'm sure you've built other ones. What types of questions do you get from the community? Like years ago, when they started doing a lot of cell towers, people were scared because they were getting exposed to different types of things from the cell towers? I mean, are we going to get those types of questions? Like, what are we being exposed to? Just a couple of those, just a couple of things floating in my head. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Great question. So, if this is a conversation that we move forward with, then we can, I'd love to wonk out on the electrical part of it, but just basically, it'd be 3 cables, and each one holds about 400 megawatts. And then they are insulated in a concrete coffer, and then buried under the road, or under this. When they're at sea, they're just buried under the seabed. And we do have to make sure that we're mindful about, I think you may have been talking about electromagnetic frequency or electromagnetic fields, which you do hear concern about sometimes, often by people talking on a cell phone, which creates more of it than really anything else around us. But in any case, having these underground and having them inside coffer dams, really, that's used to insulate it and to prevent any electromagnetic force from coming from there.
Is it also, how deep do you typically install these things? We have a
So-
lot of underground utilities that would potentially be in conflict. Any route that you pick? We were trying to give you some of that information in the last month or so.
So you broke up a little bit there, Joe, but I think you were mentioning that there's already a lot of utilities under your streets.
Correct.
And so that's something that we would be really eager to have our engineers sit down with yours and get into that. I know it's tough in all the places that we live around here. The stuff has been buried under the streets for a long time. It's not like Texas, where everybody knows where everything is because it's pretty new. So we'll be very mindful of that. We're also mindful of flood risk and not wanting to add any infrastructure there that would be at risk of flooding. And then the other thing I want to stress is that we don't intend to use any oil-cooled or oil-filled cables. I don't know if you recall, that was an issue in your area back when I was the electric regulator for Long Island. So I'm always relieved that the engineers tell me, no, that's not something we need to do. So I can get you more details on the EMF, EMP information, but really that level of burial and the exact depth of the street, I can't answer that, because for that exact reason, we don't know what's under there, which streets and what's under there exactly.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
So you said 3 cables, about 400 megawatts each. So we're looking at what, like 500 kV cables?
I think 400.
400? Okay. All right. The turbines, I'm guessing it's probably too early. You haven't picked the turbines themselves yet, but are you probably going to go with one of the newer, like the Haliad X or the new Siemens, the big 14, 15 megawatt turbines?
That's the idea. And that's one of the reasons why we haven't picked. Some of our competitors picked their turbine earlier in their process, but we've just, clearly you're on top of this information. They have become so much bigger, and that means more efficient, and they generate more energy, and you can use fewer of them. So that's the idea we've been holding out, because we'd really like to use one of those new models.
All right,
it would be great.
So probably looking at, for 2,000 megawatts, ballpark 150 turbines, and
well, it's 1,200 megawatts.
Well, that was Empire 2, but if you one and 2 combined is about a little over 2,000.
Yes, that's right.
All right, so they're going to be about 800 feet tall with the blades then. All right, I'm just trying to gauge what we're going to be having offshore.
Sure.
So
and and as we move forward, we'll be more than happy to do another briefing on that if you're interested. We've done, I think, 2 open houses at your city hall. But since COVID, we haven't been able to do a public event like that. So anytime we want to go into that structure of the wind farm, happy to.
Right. Now, you said the towers were going to be manufactured up at the Port of Albany, the bases in Brooklyn, it sounded like.
The bases will be in New York Harbor.
Okay.
And
But
then it'll all get put together in Brooklyn.
Okay. So where's you didn't mention where the O&M base was going to be. Where's that?
Also in Brooklyn.
That's also Brooklyn. Okay.
Yep. And we looked really hard in Nassau County, and we tried hard. But what we found was the size of the vessel that we need to use. We couldn't reliably get in and out of Jones Inlet with weather. And we need to operate 24/7. We need to be able to operate 24/7. And there's residential, right at all those marinas. So I know I was disappointed. I think a lot of us were, but we've pivoted to, well, let's find and train and hire workers from the South Shore and make sure that they have priority in getting those O&M jobs.
Okay. And sorry, some of these are probably more, I work in this industry, so I guess I may ask a little more deep. How are you getting around the Jones Act?
Complying with the Jones Act. Some of our competitors have different ideas, but what we're doing is the kind of vessel that's needed to actually lift and install the turbines, the jackup vessel, that doesn't exist yet in the US.
Right.
So it'll come from Europe, but it will not come in shore. It will come and it will jack up out in the lease area. And then the components will be brought by barge from Brooklyn to the lease area.
So they're going to sort of do like they did with Block Island. They'll be outside of the federal waters, so they don't have to be U.S. flagged.
They're in federal waters, but they won't be going into port.
Okay.
Or
right.
moving any equipment from a port to another port.
Okay. All right. So they're not going to reflag the vessels.
No, I think we all very much want there to be U.S. flagged jackup vessels sometime soon. But what our calculation was this: we really wanted to build this in New York. The only place we could really find to build it in New York is Brooklyn, and that's inside the Verrazano. And jackup vessel's not going to go up there anyway. And this barge solution, even in Europe, they're realizing this makes a lot of sense, because do you really want that huge vessel going in and out of the port?
Right.
And this sort of thinking about it this way really helps deal with the bridge infrastructure that we have in New York.
Okay. I think that was it. The blades, where are the blades going to be manufactured?
It depends on which company.
Well, obviously, it'll depend on which turbine you pick, but okay.
But even the GE blades are made in France. It's a global supply chain for now. We're super happy to have those two major components that we're making here for the very first project. And, that'll be the next step, right? We got to lure blades and nacelles.
Okay. So they'll still come. Right. We're not going to set up manufacturing here necessarily in the near term for stuff like that.
I think we have to build a project or two.
Sure. It's got to be.
But we're always thinking about it.
Right. Got to warrant the investment.
I know Senator Schumer is too.
Sure. All right. I think I got my questions answered. Anyone else? All right. Hearing none. So thank you very much. I guess this is just an early conversation in this. You still got a lot of years of bureaucracy with BOEM and others to deal with.
Couple, yeah. Yep.
So,
but it's it's doing it all. But your community is as important as they are. There's no question. It all has to work together for this to happen.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm sure we'll be talking again.
Hey, John, can I ask a couple of questions?
Sure, if you want to jump in.
What is the level of change between the depth of your transmission cable and where the Lloyd aquifer starts?
I don't know. I would have to find out. I don't know how deep the aquifer is, but that's an excellent question that I should know the answer to.
But you would eventually, that would be a question that you would certainly get, not from me, but from other people. As we recently had I think you answered this question, Julia, but we recently had a Verizon Fios cable that was cut accidentally or maybe through maintenance. You described the concrete that surrounded the cable. Do you know how thick that concrete has to be, or is that something that you would develop at a later date?
I'm fairly certain that those specifications are known, but I don't know them off the top of my head. I mean, it is designed to be, extremely secure. And at the end of the day, it's how we get our product to market. So it's absolutely 100% in our interest to make it as foolproof as possible.
And what type of permitting trail has to happen?
Yep.
In
Good question.
Is it federal first, then state, then local, town, DEC, all of the different agencies? Because you're going
Great question.
from ocean to land to another municipality under the Reynolds Channel, which I believe is town of Hempstead. It could be Nassau County. So what is the priority in your business model?
So the answer is yes, meaning it's all concurrent. And if we can get this right, then we'll get all the permits, knock on wood, at once. And so we have a large team of permitting folks. And so the federal government permits the wind farm, but they consider anything that's built because of the wind farm to also be their jurisdiction. So they will also look at the landfall, the plan to go under the beach, the plant, every roadway, all of that. Just because that's in New York, they don't ignore it. They dig into every little bit because it's part of the wind farm. Now, the same thing happens on the flip side with New York State. They have Article 7 is the New York State transmission operator permitting process. And it's great because it gets all the state agencies, and we have a call with every state agency every month, because there would be probably 15 agencies that would want to be the presiding agency. So Article 7 covers everything soup to nuts from when we enter state waters 3 miles offshore to our interconnection. But because there would be no cable if there weren't a wind farm, they also look at that too and make sure that we've done everything right there, particularly with community participation. So at the same time, if we want to bring a cable through your city or in town of Hempstead or county road, then that all has to be worked out as well. So it almost can't be done in a consecutively, because then by the time you finish the last one, who knows what will have happened. So really, to get it all so that we can get the permits we need about 2 years from now has been the goal since 2017.
If you could briefly describe the education needed for your typical workforce.
So this is a great question. This is something I've been working on quite a bit with some of the workforce development folks in Nassau and with the state. So our O&M workers in the UK, there's sort of two different backgrounds. A lot are retired military. And when I say retired, like retired after 5 years, they're young men and women. And they have the skills and the mindset to just be excellent operations and maintenance wind techs. But a significant number of our wind techs don't have any professional training. They come from high school. They've had solid math and science, maybe VOTech, and we hire them and we put them through our own training process, which takes 9 months to a year. And it's not just ours, it's also whichever turbine manufacturer we choose also has several weeks of on-site training. So part of this is even in the workforce readiness category, getting kids used to the idea that they might have to leave home for 6 months to be trained for their new job, which just is culturally isn't something that we see a lot. My UK colleagues always just say, like, we need hardworking folks who love the sea. And I'm like, well, that's not going to cut it around here. We want to know, kids want to know what they need so that they can have a good chance of getting these jobs. And so it's great that New York has a lot of resources at the state and county level to try to figure something out.
Have you done any windmills or this type of project anywhere in the United States currently?
There are no offshore wind farms in the United States currently, except for 2 very small pilot projects that were built as demonstrations to show that it works. One is right off of Block Island. You can see it from the North Shore sometimes.
Mhm.
And the other was just built in Virginia. So the answer is no. Permitting and getting offshore wind off the ground in the US has been a long process. I worked in onshore wind for a few years, and which was wonderful. But onshore is where people live. And it's in a place like New York where there are a lot of people. It's not easy. The ocean is, of course, an incredibly important ecosystem, and marine industry is important. But this is, I think the U.S. is going to find that this is very well suited for the way that we use the ocean and that we use energy.
And I think the last question is just on mathematics, I guess. As the eagle flies, it seems like it's much more direct coming somewhere through the city of Long Beach to the Barrett station than it would be the town of Hempstead
That's true.
on a cost basis. Okay. Thank you, Julia.
That's true. But this is, but this is why, we don't want to presume, really, right? So, but you're absolutely right.
I couldn't ask you a question because you would have to use some kind of European model. Is what, if any, rate benefit would ratepayers have long term? I know you can't answer that, but would you venture to say that there is some sort of benefit
Absolutely.
in the rates?
Absolutely. And I feel like Long Islanders know better than anybody when you get that LIPA surcharge for when it's super cold in February. The fluctuations in price when you're on an island and you have to buy gas and buy fuel to run those power plants means that it's very hard to have predictable price. So we won these contracts with New York State to sell them the wind power at a stable price, and it's lower than a lot of the energy that you buy now, and it's going to be the same price for whether it's freezing or
Yeah, that's what my concern is. New York State in general has the benefit of the rate, and how it's distributed may not be always to the locality that's having the
right.
effect.
And in this case, it is. I know that there's at least one more project that NYSERDA itself has procured, and that through a different kind of deal. But the one that the state is doing, it's you get, it's very clear, it's very predictable, and it keeps the price predictable for the utilities and for the state.
Right, like for your gross receipts tax, you'll know that this person or this area generated the fee based upon usage, and therefore the local municipality would get some kind of credit for that. That's where I'm going with this question, Julia.
I don't know if I understand completely.
I guess
I think I know where you're going with that, Councilman Delory. You know, and that's something that would have to be really sort of negotiated with the local power authority, not with the subcontractor that is providing the power.
and the local power authority would be who today?
LIPA.
Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you, Julia.
You bet.
I have one question. Are there any concerns that transferring such a large amount of electricity just under the seafloor will create heat and negatively affect the aquatic ecosystem?
It's a great question. The way that the cables are insulated, even when at sea and the depth below the seabed, there have been a lot of studies that to show that it doesn't have that negative impacts. We have seen some studies that show when it's not buried properly, there can be some changes in the behavior. I've seen one study where they had a live camera and the cable wasn't buried properly and all the lobsters hung out on top of it. So we are not going to create that kind of situation. You know, New York's the type of place that really makes sure that people build things right. And that's why we'll bury it to the depth that we commit to. And it'll be inspected.
Thank you.
It's a good question.
Just Joe's question just popped one up in my head. I'm guessing this would be part of an environmental impact statement, but some of the areas we're talking about were used for many years by New York City as basically a dumping ground, garbage dumping ground. The construction, what mitigations do you see are necessary to keep from churning up stuff? Because quite frankly, it would wash up on our beaches.
So for the last couple of years, we have been using a high-tech survey vessel to map the ocean floor and the subfloor, the benthic habitat of the subfloor, down to every bit of minute detail. And then we're back out there this summer just doing that exact focus on where we hope to put each individual turbine and again on the cable route. And when you do see what a cable route ends up, you know, the final version at sea, there's some jigs and jags, and that's the exact reason. You know, you have a couple of really, really old fish traps off Long Beach, which you know, you find out about these things sometimes from local lore, and then it turns out they're really there. So we'll go around those and the sandbar, and we're really learning a terrific amount about this. But it's an issue for sure that we have things that are buried in the sediment, even more so in the harbor, that we have to be really careful about stirring up.
Okay. All right. Any more questions? All right. Thank you, guys. Like I said, I'm sure we'll be talking again.
Hope so.
And thanks for this. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for your time and attention. And let's keep in touch. If you think of any questions tomorrow, please, John knows how to reach me.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. John, we have any information we can share on beach pass sales?
I was going to, we jumped straight into that, but yes, so it was announced today that the physical beach passes will be going on sale this Saturday morning. All that information is on the website, so longbeachny.gov/beach. So it's going to be sold at least for the weekend, both at the gazebo and at the trailer on Laurelton. But the hours for each of them and the frequency for each of them, as well as the cost of the beach passes, are online. Again, we are introducing an electronic beach pass this year. Those obviously are not going to be redeemable until Memorial Day itself. So we're trying to test out all the bugs we can on the system and make sure that it is up and firing and all systems go. So we'll be announcing sometime next week when folks will be able to use the electronic solution for buying a virtual beach pass.
All right, great.
I would imagine, Mr. Bender, you're going to be doing another press conference about this.
I don't know.
You might as well. It's a good one.
We got Albany seems to be moving in the direction we want them to, so we don't want to antagonize them too much. So
Oh, okay.
if we're getting what we want,
Understood. Got it.
so you know, they're taking a slow migration to where we need to be.
Too slow, but
Well, the latest one now is, I guess, July 4th. They're talking about it's constantly changing. You know, I guess it depends what mood the governor's in on a given day. So,
but that's good information. Thank you for
yeah.
thank you for that.
Yes, please tell everyone, thank you for working so hard.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully everybody's not going to bum rush the gazebo on Saturday, because again, you don't need the beach passes until Memorial Day weekend, so people got time. So no reason to go.
Staff are fired up and ready to go.
Right,
Councilman Bendo.
no, they do a good job. They do a good job.
You know, there's going to be a line. It's just that I think the first day of
we will be ready for anybody and everybody that comes out.
it becomes a social thing.
It is, it's a tradition.
Oh yeah, last year when I got in line, the line, you know, kind of wrapped around the gazebo and up the
Exactly.
walkway there. And I was back a ways, but the line moved quick. They were really cranking them out. They were doing a good job. So
Yeah, you know, it's the Saturday event, the morning event.
are we allowed to say what color they are yet, or it's still a
No,
secret
no,
until-
no, no.
Okay. All right. I just was wondering. That's always that and the polar bear sweatshirts are always the two big things. We got what color are they going to be? So, all right. I think that was it for tonight. Anyone got anything else? All right. Hearing nothing. Thanks. And I guess for those of you watching, thanks for joining. And we will
Have a good night.
see you
Thank
Tuesday
you.
at the city council meeting.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
All right.